Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's start our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a detailed analysis. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a couple of important announcements. We are starting our new batch from the 23rd of March, starting from today. And if you want to enroll for our classes, this would be the perfect opportunity for you. In the upcoming summit batch, you will get access to the live and recorded lectures by our top educators, along with the study material, the test series, and one on one mentorship as well. So, to avail the subscription, this would be the perfect opportunity as Unacademy is providing a flat 55% off, along with up to 6 months of free extension. The subscription is available at just 17,999, which means on a per month basis, you'll be paying around 833 rupees approximately. I'm told this offer will end tomorrow. So those interested, please click on the link provided in the video description. And to avail the offer, you have to use the code IAS English. The second important announcement is related to Conquer Prelims 2026. So we are starting phase 4 of Conquer Prelims 2026, where we will cover the high yielding topics from different subjects. These sessions, starting from today, they will be held exclusively on the Unacademy app. So let me show the timetable of these classes. From 23rd March to 1st April, we have multiple sessions planned, and these sessions will take place at 12 p.m., 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. on the Unacademy app. You can take a screenshot of this timetable and please access these free classes on the Unacademy app. You just have to go to the educator profile by searching for the educator, and under the free special classes tab, you can see the classes to be scheduled over there. So with this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 8, there's a very important article related to the topic of compulsory voting. Should voting be made compulsory? Because see, the exercise of casting a vote is the very hallmark of a functional democracy. A participatory form of democracy is built on the foundation of greater voter turnout. When you look at India's elections, generally our voter turnout has been less than impressive. If you look at the latest Lok Sabha elections of 2024, according to the Election Commission of India, the voter turnout was just around 65.79%. In the previous Lok Sabha election of 2019, the voter turnout was around 67.4%, which means the voter turnout has declined from 2019 to 2024. Even in the past Lok Sabha elections and other state assembly elections, the voter turnout in India is not that impressive. It needs to be at least above 75%, closer to 80%, which is seen as more ideal. Because when there is a low voter turnout, that's an indicator that the electorate is not too keen in participating in the democratic exercise. And that could undermine democracy itself. It could create an opportunity for political parties to exploit the low voter turnout and influence a minority section of the voters by resorting to vote bank politics. Parties might resort to populist schemes just to impress a small section of the voters because they know that the voter turnout might be low. And if they can manage to convince just a small percentage of the voters, they can still win the elections. So this ends up creating a vicious cycle, breeding corruption in the government as well. So increasing voter turnout and participation in elections is very, very critical for a functional and thriving democracy. So in this context, some suggest that we should introduce the concept of compulsory voting, where voting is made mandatory. And if you violate this mandate, there might be a penalty. Fines might be imposed on you. or some services might be denied to you if you don't cast your vote. So, this article here explores the idea of compulsory voting. Is it suited for Indian context? Can it be enforced? Will it achieve the desired results? And what is the global scenario in this regard? Are there any countries which actually have compulsory voting with penal provisions? That is something we'll understand in this article. So, first, let's talk about the constitutional and legal status of right to vote. When you look at the Indian Constitution under Article 326, citizens have been provided with the right to vote without any discrimination. There are just a few conditions to be met for you to be an eligible voter. You need to be at least 18 years and above, which ensures universal adult franchise. And apart from this, there is no other discrimination apart from the age criteria. But if, let's say, a citizen is otherwise disqualified under the Constitution to be registered as a voter for some reason, only they can be left out from the electoral roll. So, barring this, everyone else will exercise the right to vote as per Article 326. So, does this make right to vote a constitutional right? Since it is provided under Article 326, it does mention that citizens have the right to vote without discrimination. Does it make it a constitutional right? This has been a matter of debate for many, many years. And the Supreme Court, through repeated rulings and judgments, has provided some clarity on this. The Supreme Court is very clear that right to vote in India is not a constitutional right. It is seen as a statutory right, a legal right. So when you look at right to vote under the Representation of the People Act 1950, we have section 19 which provides for the criteria to be fulfilled by citizens to be eligible voters. One, you need to be a minimum of 18 years of age, and you need to be ordinarily resident in the constituency where you're looking to cast your vote. If you're registered on the electoral roll in a particular constituency, right, you need to be ordinary resident of that particular constituency. Then section 62 of RPA 1951 provides that right to vote to every person whose name is entered in the electoral roll of that particular constituency. So all the voters registered on the voters list in that particular constituency will exercise the right to cast a vote in the elections for that respective constituency. So the legal provisions are very clear and the constitutional mandate is also very clear. So right to vote remains a statutory right, not a constitutional right. But this again explains the constitutional and legal position with regard to right to vote. Now, talking about compulsory voting, would it solve the problem for India? Would it increase voter turnout? Is that the only way to do that? See, this issue has been explored, discussed, and debated many times in the past. Back in 1990, the government and the Election Commission of India had constituted a committee to focus on electoral reforms. It was headed by Dinesh Goswami. The Dinesh Goswami Committee on Electoral Reforms, set up in 1990, it was strongly opposed to the idea of compulsory voting. Compulsory voting was not recommended. The committee did not favor compulsory voting because of the practical difficulties involved in its implementation. Because when you are making voting compulsory, how will you enforce it, right? To enforce that, there needs to be some sort of penal provisions, either fines, penalties, or denial of certain government services. But that is seen as too extreme in the Indian context. Because voting is not a fundamental duty. It's not a legal duty of the voters. This is something which can't be enforced on the citizens. So Dinesh Goswami Committee was against it. Even the Law Commission of India, if you look at the 255th report, which was brought out in 2015, even the Law Commission recommended against compulsory voting. Though it pointed out that compulsory voting could significantly increase the voter turnout average by at least 7% and above, but still it recommended that it's not feasible in the Indian context to make voting compulsory. Now, when you look at the global scenario, there are few countries where compulsory voting is provided. If you look at Australia, if you look at Latin American countries like Brazil, Argentina, Peru, all these countries have compulsory voting. In Australia, Argentina, and Brazil, if voters, if they don't have a valid reason to miss the right to vote, then they are penalized with hefty fines and penalties. In Peru, government services, public services are denied to those voters who do not cast their vote. See, this provision, maybe it works in countries like Australia or in some Latin American countries. But most experts agree that it is not suited in the Indian context. Penalizing the voters, imposing fines on them, and again, creating an entire system to keep a check on this. It's going to be a redundant exercise. And denying public services because people are not casting their vote would again go against the very framework of our constitution as well. So, most experts agree that making voting compulsory is not feasible in the Indian context. Though, as an idea, it sounds great, it can be debated, discussed, but most commissions, experts have agreed that compulsory voting might be too extreme in India. And also, this might go against your fundamental right to free speech and expression, which is guaranteed as a fundamental right under Article 19. Because the freedom to speech and expression also includes the right not to vote. As a citizen, if I feel that I don't want to be politically active, I don't want to cast my vote, maybe I don't like any of the political parties and leaders, then that is a free speech or expression that I would like to express. So, under Article 19, there arises a conflict. If voting is made compulsory, it could be in conflict with your fundamental right to free speech and expression, which gives you the right not to cast your vote. So, given these aspects, it is not suited for India to introduce compulsory voting. So, what does it mean? What do we do then? Do we remain idle? Should we do nothing? What we can do is to increase voter turnout. There are certain steps that can be taken. Creating more enthusiasm amongst young voters, reaching out to colleges, building this culture right from the school level plays a very big role. Leveraging the power of social media, running very innovative campaigns to spread awareness, to basically build that excitement and attract more voters to come out on voting day to the polling booth and cast their votes. Make the citizens feel that they are part of the India story, the India narrative. Make them feel that their vote, each and every vote matters to determine India's trajectory. So, building that sense of excitement, enthusiasm is very critical to drive greater voter participation. Then, another problem is migrant workers. Most workers who are working in other states in different constituencies from where they are registered, they can't easily go back to their constituency to cast their vote. So, ensuring that the statutory holiday, the mandatory holiday which is given, is provided by all the companies and factories. Arranging for transportation, ensuring there are buses and trains available, cheap transportation available, so that all migrant workers can go back to their home constituency, cast their vote, and come back. These are some basic steps which can ensure that we can try and increase the voter turnout, at least by a few percentage points. So, this is seen as a better alternative than compulsory voting with penalties and punishments. So, what is your take on this? Should we make voting compulsory in India, or is it not suited for Indian context? Let me know your views in the comments. And please take up this question for your answer writing practice. Now, moving on, we have a very interesting article today on page number 9 that focuses on coal gasification. See, right now, India is facing an unprecedented crisis because of the war and conflict in West Asia. The West Asia conflict has disrupted energy supplies, particularly supplies of LPG and LNG, is where India has become extremely vulnerable due to the lack of strategic buffers and excessive import dependency for LPG, LNG supplies. India's vulnerability has been completely exposed in the ongoing West Asia conflict. Now, what if I told you India could have probably avoided this situation if bureaucratic red tapeism did not exist? If India's decision makers, policy makers, if they had far-sightedness, if they had a far-sighted vision, if they had planned for the long term, India could have avoided this by relying on coal gasification. It's a very interesting story of post independent India, the hard journey that India went through, and how one idea that was proposed did not receive adequate support within the system. And if it had, probably India would have been slightly better off to deal with such supply shocks of oil, gas, and other energy products. So, first, let's understand where does this idea originate from? The idea to gasify coal. Yes, coal can be gasified and can be supplied as a gas. So we'll understand that scientific chemical process later. But first, let's talk about the idea itself. In 1955, a legendary Indian scientist and researcher, Syed Hussain Zahir, proposed the idea of coal gasification and supplying gasified coal through pipes to industries, to households, so that India could become self reliant. See, India has sufficient coal deposits, especially the non caking coke fuel, which is sufficiently available in the form of shale coal, lignite, and bituminous coal. It is widely found across India, though it's of slightly lower calorific value compared to coal found in some other countries like Indonesia or Australia. The lignite and bituminous coal available in India, along with some of the shale coal deposits, would have been sufficient to gasify the coal and supply the gas through piped connections. So, this idea was floated by Syed Hussain Zahir. Syed Hussain Zahir was a chemist who was working at the RRLH, the Regional Research Laboratory, Hyderabad, which today is your Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, which is one of the labs under CSIR. Later, Syed Hussain Zahir would go on to become the DG, the Director General of the CSIR itself. So, this idea was floated by Syed Hussain Zahir, and the idea reached then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru appreciated the idea, understood the relevance of this concept, and eventually appointed Syed Hussain Zahir as the DG of CSIR in 1962 to take forward this proposal. But because of India's external and internal challenges, bureaucratic red tapeism, delays, and constant infighting between different departments and ministries, the idea was lost. And it took many, many years and decades of effort for India to revive this plan. And that exposes the weakness of India with regard to coal gasification. In fact, the major trigger for giving a push for coal gasification was in 1973 during the massive oil crisis that was again rooted in West Asia. During the Yom Kippur War involving Israel and some of the Arab states. Since US backed Israel, the oil producing and exporting nations of OPEC, the members of OPEC, they halted oil production in order to exert economic pressure to oppose the American support to Israel during the Yom Kippur War. So this oil crisis affected oil supplies to India, exposing the supply side constraints on India's part. It highlighted India's vulnerability as we were heavily dependent on West Asian oil supplies. So following this, there was a slight push given by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to revive the idea of coal gasification. And it took many, many years and decades of effort to even realize the pilot project. So it is this history that you need to understand. Now, before we proceed and talk about what happened later, let's talk about coal gasification. Like, how is coal gasified? It might be shocking for some of you, like a solid substance like coal, how can it be gasified? See, Syed Hussain Zahir proposed the idea of town gas supply scheme. How towns and cities like Hyderabad, where the institute was based out of, how the city can be supplied with piped gas by turning coal into gas which can be used as a fuel. The same could be provided for industries as well. So this is done by basically applying tremendous pressure. High pressure is applied along with oxygen as it helps increase the thermal efficiency. The thermal efficiency of coal is further driven up by blending it with oxygen, and this is done primarily under extreme high pressure that results in the gasification of coal. This results in products like hydrogen sulfide, carbonyl sulfide. And as you know, hydrogen sulfide is highly flammable. But eventually, the sulfur content is removed. The sulfur byproduct is removed to produce elemental sulfur through the acidic gas. And the rest of the hydrocarbon content is what is retained. Now, this might have some particulate matter, it might have some impurities. So, this can be removed through the process of scrubbing by using water. Water scrubbing can be used to further filter and purify the gas, and all the remaining particulate matter is also taken out. So, the resultant gas is as good as any other energy source, and it will have decent thermal efficiency because of its blending with oxygen under high pressure, and can be used for cooking purposes in households, can be used for industrial purposes as well, from metallurgical industries to fertilizer industries. So this proposal was built on the idea of making India self-reliant to ensure we don't depend heavily on gas imports from the outside. So in 1940s, coal gasification was used across many European and American cities for street lighting. So on a commercial scale, the technology, the idea had been tested out. So all India had to do was implement a pilot project, test out the technicalities, and then create the infrastructure needed for this. But it would require nationwide pipelines to be built, right? So Syed Hussain Zahir proposed that we can make use of railway network, and parallelly the pipelines can be built so that it's easier to set up and maintain them. And the railways can also benefit by using the gas as a source of energy as well. This was the idea that was floated by, Syed Hussain Zahir. So initially, when the idea was brought up in front of the Prime Minister Nehru, back in late 1950s, appreciated the idea. He understood it was a much more economical model, something which would make India self-reliant. And he would go on to appoint Syed Hussain Zahir as the DG of CSIR in 1962. But unfortunately for India, from 1962 onwards, multiple challenges started coming up. One would be the war with China and the war with Pakistan. So during the period of war, obviously the priorities of India would be different. And remember, this was an India which had just become independent, which was struggling with economic challenges, social problems, security problems, etc. So two back-to-back wars with neighbors like Pakistan and China. It drained government exchequer, and government focus and priority was different. Because see, this project would require some imported machinery, which India did not have at that point. India would require to import some machinery from Germany, which would be very costly. So the war and the cost overrun because of devaluation of the Indian rupee following the wars became a major constraint. Plus, there was bureaucratic red tapeism within the government. Various ministries and departments, they were working at crossheads because their priorities were different. Like Planning Commission, for example, opposed the idea of coal gasification because it believed that relying more on crude oil and LNG is much better for India as compared to coal gasification. There was opposition from Ministry of Steel, Mines and Fuel. Even Railway Ministry expressed concern that laying such large pipelines and infrastructure is near impossible given the cost and the difficulty in establishing such infrastructure. So even the CSIR, within CSIR as well, there was a lot of internal opposition. So eventually the idea was dragged, delayed. Then it took Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to acknowledge the mistakes that had happened in the past. And it was Prime Minister Indira Gandhi who started backing the idea of coal gasification, especially after the 1973 oil crisis. Right? India realized to what extent we were vulnerable to supply shocks because of geopolitical events. So following the Yom Kippur War, India accelerated the plan. In 1972 itself, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had approved the pilot coal gasification project at RRLH. But after the oil crisis of 1973, further momentum was added. Finally, by 1985, the first plant was set up. The integrated gasification combined cycle with BHEL along with CSIR. It was a joint collaboration between these two public institutions, and they managed to set up the first coal gasification plant in 1985. So, though it was successful as an idea, it was never commercially scaled, primarily because the government was focused on other sources of energy, from crude oil to LNG and LPG, etc. But coal gasification was never really prioritized. And this happens to be a failure of the Indian state, the Indian governments. Now, finally, the Modi government has revived the idea of coal gasification. In 2021, the National Coal Gasification Mission was launched. And today, the mission has an allocation of 85,000 crores. The goal is to achieve 100 million tons of coal being gasified by the end of the decade. So, this can give some degree of uh, self reliance for India, some degree of independence, reduce our dependency to some extent. See, it's not that we can rely 100% on coal gasification. We will still require LPG, LNG imports, but at least you can reduce the exposure, reduce the vulnerability, and become a little more self reliant so that you are better insulated from these supply shocks. So, based on this, take up a practice question based on coal gasification. Now, moving on, we have another interesting article on page 7 where the Hindu has published few interesting charts and infographics to help understand India's double risk that we are facing with regard to urea supplies because of the conflict in West Asia. There is a double hit that India is facing with regard to urea supplies and production, and it's a result of the ongoing war against Iran. I'm sure all of you know that urea is a critical fertilizer for agriculture. It's the most widely used fertilizer. So essentially, your food security, your agricultural productivity, in fact, your entire rural agrarian economy is dependent on urea supplies. It's not an understatement if I say that your food security, rural agrarian economy, and agricultural productivity, and the well being of our farmers is dependent primarily on urea supplies. And right now, we are facing a serious threat. And there is a dual threat. See, some amount of urea is domestically produced in India. But to produce urea, you require LNG. LNG is one of the feedstock. LNG is used to produce ammonia, which in turn goes into the manufacturing of urea. So domestic production of urea fertilizer is already taking a hit as fertilizer plants are cutting their capacity because of the unavailability of LNG supplies. Since government has prioritized household supplies and few commercial supplies, supplies to fertilizer industries has been affected. It has not been completely stopped, but definitely the supplies have been hit. And most fertilizer factories have cut their production by more than half. So this represents one risk that we are facing, where domestic production of urea could be hit because of the unavailability of LNG. The second challenge is urea imports. Since our domestic production doesn't take care of the demand for urea, right? There is a gap compared to the urea demand in the market and the domestic urea that we produce. There is a huge mismatch. So we'll fill that gap through urea imports, which primarily comes from West Asian countries. Countries like Qatar, Oman, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. They are critical. So urea imports have also been disrupted because of the conflict. So that is the double whammy that India is dealing with right now. So let's understand this with greater detail by looking at data and statistics. See, when you look at LNG imports, India happens to be the fourth largest buyer of natural gas in the world. Please make a note of this, could be important for your prelims. India is the fourth largest buyer of LNG, importing around 261 lakh metric tons. More than 50% of LNG that we use is coming through imports, with around 49-50% being produced domestically. So this highlights India's import dependency when it comes to LNG supplies. So as one of the largest buyers, which has more than 50% dependency on imports, obviously we are massively affected by the disruption in gas supplies. Now, most of the gas comes through Hormuz Strait. As we've discussed in previous sessions, almost 60% of the supplies that we get comes through Hormuz. Qatar, being the top supplier of LNG, approximately supplying 40%, 41%, with US being the next big supplier, and UAE, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. They account for around 26% of the supplies, and all their supplies pass through Hormuz Strait. So this highlights our dependency on Hormuz Strait as well, which is today effectively paralyzed because of the conflict. So when you see how LNG is utilized in our country, right? Most of the LNG is allocated for fertilizer production. Almost 28-29% of LNG is assigned for fertilizer sector. Then around 23% for city gas distribution, especially where piped natural gas is supplied. Around 11% for the power industry, where gas-fired power plants generate electricity by using steam to turn turbines. Around 8% for petrochemical refinery industry, 8 and 5.9% respectively, where different petrochemical products are produced by using LNG as one of the feedstock material. So as you can see, fertilizer industry, especially urea production, heavily depends on LNG supply. So when you look at urea production, as I told you, LNG is used to produce ammonia, which in turn is turned into urea. So since India can't meet the domestic requirement just through domestic production, there is a gap in the demand and supply. We import urea as well. India imports urea on a massive scale. Most of it comes from West Asian countries again, with Oman being the top supplier, approximately 44%, 45%, then Russia, Saudi, Qatar, and UAE. So much of these urea imports are also passing through Hormuz Strait. So the continued war and the disruption of Hormuz affects the supply of urea as well, not just LNG. So that is the double hit that we are facing. On one side, our domestic urea production is getting compromised because of inadequate supply of LNG. And the import of urea is also getting hit because of the war. As of now, India has sufficient reserves, but with upcoming Kharif season, right, only time will tell whether India would be able to manage this situation, right? Because see, otherwise, we might stare at a very serious crisis, something which could affect agricultural productivity, something which could impact the rural agrarian economy and impact food security as well. Now, moving on, we have another important article on the supplement page related to economy and environment and ecology. This article will help you understand the concept of AgriPVs or agri photovoltaics. So let's understand what are AgriPVs and why is it in news. AgriPVs are in news because the government is looking to revamp the PM Kusum scheme. Under PM Kusum 2.0, the government is planning to include agri photovoltaics under this particular scheme. So what is PM Kusum? Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Uttan Mahabhiyan. This scheme was launched in 2019 by the government of India, and it has multiple goals and objectives. One primary goal is to incentivize farmers to help increase their income and push farmers to move away from diesel based generators, mainly for water pumps, to decarbonize and de-dieselize the farm sector and provide sources of irrigation that is based on clean renewable energy, such as solar photovoltaic cells. See, in agricultural farms, traditionally farmers depend heavily on diesel generators and pumps to pump water, which is the source of irrigation. So the goal here is to decarbonize the farm sector, push farmers through an incentive model, and make them adopt cleaner forms of energy like solar, and try to move them away from diesel based water pumps and generators. So, for this, the government provides a subsidy of up to 60% on the total cost of solar irrigation, and this will reduce the burden on the power grid as well. So, that is the broad vision of PM Kusum. Now, the government is expanding the scheme. In the recent budget, the government has allocated around 5,000 crores for PM Kusum, the second version of it, which is being brought out. So this can ensure water security for the farmers. It can contribute to increased income and help decarbonize the farm sector. So as the PM Kusum 2.0 is being conceptualized, there is a proposal to include AgriPVs under it. Because see, under PM Kusum, under the previous edition, it was only solar irrigation which was covered. Only solar irrigation pumps were being subsidized. Now the proposal is to subsidize AgriPVs as well. So what are AgriPVs? It's essentially blending of agriculture with solar power production. See, when you look at solar power plants, it requires massive quantities of land. If you want to really set up commercial scale solar plants and give a high share for solar energy in your energy basket, then you need thousands and thousands of hectares of land so that the solar panels, the PV photovoltaics can be laid. But in India, a country with the largest population in the world, land is a very precious, limited resource, right? Today in India, if you look at agrarian land, farmers are already dealing with a land crunch because land holding in India is highly fragmented, right? Most farmers in India are small, marginal farmers. So, if that being the scenario, pushing for more solar projects could become unrealistic beyond a certain point because of the shortage of land, because of unavailability of land. If you want to acquire more land for solar projects, it might end up affecting farmers. They may have to lose their farmland. So, the solution for this dilemma is to promote agri PVs, agri photovoltaics, because you're blending agriculture with solar panel setup in the same agricultural field. You can see the image here. In agri PV, the cropping which is being done is not disturbed. Let's say farmers are growing vegetables like potato, tomatoes, or they're growing ragi, jowar, or even fruits like banana and others. Usually, row cropping is adopted, and these rows where the plants are coming up or where the saplings are planted, that is not disturbed. In between the rows, the space that is there, that is where solar panels can be installed. And there are different configurations available. You have these row panels, right, which moves along with sunlight, providing ample time and duration to capture maximum solar energy to generate maximum solar power. And you also have these vertical solar panels, which doesn't obstruct the plants between the two rows. You also can plant the photovoltaics on greenhouse gases or the greenhouse chambers, which are set up for farming, right? In these greenhouse facilities, where like a nursery like facility where crops are grown, on the roof and the outer walls, solar PVs can be laid, where you're fusing agriculture with solar energy production, right? So these vertical panels, they are basically elevated panels. They're raised above the ground by few meters, as you can see here, so that it will not disturb the cultivation of crops below at the surface level. You can even practice animal husbandry as well. So farmers can fuse all the three. They can fuse cropping with animal husbandry with solar panels, and thus it can generate additional income. Farmers can use part of the electricity for irrigation pumps and reduce dependency on diesel, thus bringing down emissions, decarbonizing the farm sector. And whatever surplus solar power is there, they can sell it into the power grid. They can sell it to the discoms or to nearby industries, thereby generating additional income for the farmers. And also, agri-PVs, they have a lot of environmental benefits. Agri-PVs have a lot of environmental benefits. It will not only bring financial benefit to the farmers, it has environmental benefits. First, it can reduce pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, as farmers will move away from diesel based pumps and generators. Correct? Apart from that, the solar panels which are installed, these are elevated panels as we discussed, they can provide much needed shade to protect plants from excessive sunlight. They can even protect plants from excess water and heavy rains or hailstorm during the monsoon season. Because see, plants require adequate light, adequate water. Anything in excess will ruin the crop. Right? Hailstorms can destroy standing crops. Excessive sunlight can also destroy the productivity. Similarly, overexposure to frost conditions during winter months can also destroy the crop. So these elevated solar panels can provide a form of protection, but this will depend on the type of crops you're going to cultivate. Because see, India has a very diverse agro-climatic distribution. Depending on the region, depending on the soil profile, the climatic and the agro conditions, the appropriate crops will have to be chosen to blend with agri-PV. So this will require further research, studies, the right advice to farmers from the government and the research institutions. For example, in a state like, let's say, Madhya Pradesh, studies have already shown that even when PV panels are laid, crops like tomato, onion, garlic, turmeric, ginger, leafy vegetables, tulsi, they can be easily cultivated. There's no impact on them, rather, they benefit because of the protection that solar panels provide in the form of shade and the protection they give with regard to floods or with regard to rain. In states like Karnataka, Maharashtra, especially interior parts of Karnataka, Maharashtra, where there is excessive sunlight and semi-arid conditions, crops like ragi, jowar, and the others, even chilies, banana, they can thrive even when they are blended with agri-PVs. So this will require greater participation from state governments, agriculture departments, research institutions, so that the right inputs, right advice can be given to farmers. Right? So this will require the correct policies, regulations in place. Maybe farmers can't do it on their own. Individual farmers might find it difficult. So you can encourage collective group of farmers coming together, pooling their land. Let them grow the crops they want, right? The farm ownership will not change, but they can pool the land so that they can generate viable power which is commercially feasible. Or you can create a mechanism, a regulatory framework where private players, they can lease the farmland from farmers just for laying the photovoltaics. Farmers can continue with their cropping with no impact on agriculture. It will not affect food security, right? Because you might assume, if you're encouraging the turning of farmland into solar plants, what if farmers abandon farming? See, the idea here is not to replace farming with PVs. The idea is to supplement both of them together, to fuse farming with photovoltaic cells. So a private player can lease that land and use the space between the rows, the crop rows that are there, to lay the photovoltaic cells, take the entire capital cost so that farmers don't have to invest this. The government can give incentives to those private players, or government can give direct incentives to farmers or farmer unions, which can act as a collective group. So this is the idea being proposed, and if included under PM Kusum 2.0, with right regulations and policy support and financial subsidies, this scheme can help address multiple problems. It can increase farmers' income, it can help decarbonize the farm sector, it can help improve irrigation as well. So there are multiple benefits that can arise out of agri PVs. Moving on, we have an editorial on page number 6 that focuses on right to free speech and expression, especially your digital rights, your right to post on social media, your right to express your opinions, your views. Because, see, there is a strong accusation against the central government, against the government of India, that the central government is trying to censor any content which is against the political establishment. That is a sense which prevails amongst the civil society, amongst journalists, activists, content creators. And this is not based on just one incident alone. There is a pattern, a repeat pattern that we are seeing over the years, where the government is arming itself with more and more powers to take down content on the internet, on digital platforms and social media platforms. Even content which is critical of the government, content which makes fun of politicians and government leaders, is being taken down. Recently, as a result of the LPG, LNG crisis, a lot of creative satire and memes were posted on social media by various creators, and most of them were taken down. IT Ministry, the Ministry of Electronics and IT, issued takedown orders to social media companies like Instagram, X, and others. They've been forced to block the accounts and take down these posts. There was one comedian who posted an Instagram reel mocking the prime minister and criticizing the government for not effectively handling the situation. So this is genuine criticism, which is part of your right to free speech and expression. Right? Article 19 gives you the right to criticize the government, to question government policies, and even make fun of government leaders. Because satire, political satire, has always been a very powerful weapon of free speech and expression. Be it uh, satirical cartoons or making memes. This is very much part of your free speech and expression. As long as it is decent, as long as it doesn't incite violence, as long as it doesn't violate or threaten the sovereignty of the nation, there is no harm in criticizing the government. That is your democratic right. But today, you're seeing repeated takedowns of social media content by blatantly misusing IT rules, which has become controversial day by day. A few years ago, the government used some of the emergency powers under the IT Act to block a BBC documentary stating that it would be a national security threat. It would disrupt public order. There have been incidents where posts against well-known politicians have been taken down just because it was critical of government leaders, just because it was questioning government policies. So this is where the problem arises. So you need to understand under what provisions, under what legal provisions are the takedown requests being issued, and what's the controversy surrounding it. See, under the IT Act, we have IT rules of 2021, which has been amended repeatedly. This gives wide sweeping powers to Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology to issue takedown orders to all the intermediaries, social media firms, digital media outlets, etc. They have to oblige with the takedown orders within the given deadline, or else the safe harbor provision which is extended to them under the Information Technology Act of 2000, this safe harbor would be revoked. See, under the IT Act, all IT and tech companies enjoy something called as safe harbor provision. That is, they are not directly responsible for the content which is posted on their platforms. So it provides them legal immunity, right? The company and its officials can't be criminally prosecuted. They can't be arrested for content posted by a third party user. This is a safe harbor which is given, a legal immunity. But this legal immunity is conditional. Under the new IT rules, if the intermediaries don't abide by government's takedown requests and government orders for cooperation from these intermediaries, then the government can withdraw the safe harbor provision, and this opens up the company for legal and criminal liability, meaning company executives can be arrested as well. So as a result, the government today has gained greater enforcement power, and it forces the companies to take down the content once the orders are issued by the government. So this is where we need to talk about the Shreya Singhal case. It's a landmark Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court delivered a historic verdict in 2015. In the Shreya Singhal case, the IT Act was under scrutiny, especially one specific provision, Section 66A of the IT Act. Under Section 66A, the government, if it deemed any message transmitted through a computer, through an electronic device using the internet, if it was deemed to be offensive in any manner, government authorities could issue orders to take down the content. Now, some of you might say, what's wrong in this? If offensive messages are being sent through computers and communication devices through the internet, isn't it harmful? Correct. But what is offensive? What constitutes an offensive post? Because this is very subjective, right? There's a lot of discretion available here. So, who will interpret this? It will be the police. So, what is offensive to you may not be offensive to me. So, the law never defined as to what constitutes offensive. Now, this provision was blatantly misused by police and the government authorities over the years, targeting even innocent people who were just forwarding memes or social media posts or posting satire and jokes about politicians and government leaders. They were all charged under Section 66A and they even faced arrest. So, this was challenged in the Shreya Singhal case. And the Supreme Court declared this provision to be unconstitutional because it goes against your right to free speech and expression guaranteed under Article 19. Of course, Article 19 is not absolute, right? There are reasonable restrictions. But Section 66A, it did not have any proper process, right? There was no procedural safeguards to prevent its misuse. It was not very clearly defined as to what constitutes offensive. It gave a lot of discretion, which would be open for interpretation by the police. So it would always be misused on political grounds to target dissent, to target criticism and opposition. So Supreme Court struck down Section 66A in the Shreya Singhal case as it was ultra vires with regard to fundamental rights under Article 19. In the same case, in the Shreya Singhal case, another section which was debated was Section 69A of the IT Act. This provision was upheld by the Supreme Court as constitutionally valid. So what is Section 69A, which is used even today? Even under Section 69A, certain posts on computer platforms or on the internet platforms can be taken down. But here, there are procedural safeguards. There is a clear process to ensure that the powers are not blatantly misused and abused. That is why the Supreme Court upheld Section 69A as constitutionally valid. Because here the grounds are clearly prescribed. Central and state governments, they have the powers to issue directions to intercept, monitor, decrypt any information generated, transmitted, received, or stored in any computer resource. And the grounds under which they can be issued is clearly mentioned. If a post threatens the sovereignty of the nation, integrity of the nation, defense of India, security of the state, friendly relations of India with foreign states, if it threatens public order, if it leads to incitement to offense, to violence, for investigating any offense where these platforms have been used, messaging platforms have been used. On specific grounds, following the laid down procedure, government can issue such takedown orders under Section 69A. This is open to judicial review as well. And more importantly, the reasons for the takedown has to be given in writing. If the IT ministry is issuing an order to monitor certain content, to monitor certain accounts, or to take down certain accounts, then the reasons for that has to be given in writing. It should be based on these grounds prescribed, and eventually the decision of the government is subjected to judicial review. Courts can look into it. So this is not it's not a blatant power the government has given to itself, right? It's open to judicial scrutiny, and it's seen as a system of checks and balances. So Section 69A was upheld to be constitutional. But however, today the government is not relying on Section 69A. Because under Section 69A, as I said, it needs to follow procedural safeguards. it has to give reasoned orders in writing, and it's open to judicial review. So instead of this, the current orders being issued to take down posts and content is primarily being done through Rule 16 of the IT blocking rules of 2009. Under these rules, the government can say that the blocking proceedings are confidential. So the government will not provide any reason, right? Forget providing it in writing. The government will not even state why this post is objectionable, why it should be taken down. It will simply issue a takedown order and the companies have to comply with it, or else they stand at the risk of losing safe harbor provision. So this is where the problem lies. When the orders are kept confidential, the whole procedure itself is opaque, not transparent. How will the affected individual approach the court to seek remedy, right? If the affected individual feels that his or her fundamental right has been compromised, to approach the court, you should know on what grounds is your content being taken down. So the government is using Rule 16 of the 2009 blocking rules under the IT Act to take down the content where procedure is completely opaque, it's completely confidential, and this takes away the opportunity to seek judicial review, to seek the courts to try and protect your basic fundamental rights. And it's not just the IT ministry. Today, the government has given the authority to multiple ministries and departments. You have Information Broadcasting Ministry. You have the PIB, under which a controversial fact check unit has been set up. The Bombay High Court has ruled this fact check unit to be unconstitutional. The government has appealed against it. The matter is currently pending in front of the Supreme Court. So different branches and organs of the government today have the powers to issue takedown orders. This is just at the central government level, right? Now, when you look at the state level, if you look at the number of requests that are coming in, they have increased exponentially over the years. In the last one decade, by 2014, there were around 400 to 500 requests coming in every year. Today, it has touched more than 10,000 on a yearly basis. These are just the incidents being reported, by the way. So this is where the editorial expresses concern about right to free speech and expression and how governments are stifling the right to criticize. And if there is no reasonable, valid basis to seek review, that's where the process could become problematic. It leads to questions whether this is some sort of censorship, some sort of authoritarian enforcement of the government's viewpoint to stifle criticism and dissent. So now let's move to the next set of discussion. Under page 110 and 14, we have few articles related to the Iran war. Just a few key updates, and we'll move towards the remaining section of today's newspaper. On the front page, the United States has again threatened Iran to open up Hormuz Strait. See, Donald Trump keeps making new statements each day, as I told you in the last few sessions as well. On one side, he says Iran's capabilities are decimated, that US has won this war. And on the other hand, he says there is a new military mobilization and there will be more attacks coming in the next few days. So now US has threatened Iran that if Hormuz is not opened up, in the next 48 hours, US will start targeting the power plants of Iran. Trump has threatened heavy bombardment of Iran's critical infrastructure. Iran's military and energy infrastructure has already been significantly damaged, both by US and Israel. Now Trump is threatening to go after Iran's power plants. So in retaliation, Iran has also issued a threat that if power plants are attacked by US or Israel, Iran will escalate the conflict to target critical infrastructure across West Asia. Iran has already been targeting oil and gas facilities, right? It has targeted major cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. It has hit multiple petrochemical facilities. Now Iran is escalating the threat that if power plants are hit by US or Israel, Iran might retaliate against power facilities, water desalination plants that are located across the West Asia region. Iran has said that critical infrastructure in West Asia would be irreversibly destroyed if the US attacks power plants of Iran. So this is a sign that the conflict is nowhere near to coming to an end, as claimed by Trump. In fact, it is showing some signs of escalation. There are possibilities where the conflict could further escalate, and worse is probably yet to come. So that is why it is of utmost importance to exert pressure on all the parties, on Iran, on Israel, on US, to take a step back, to de-escalate. And this pressure can come only from the other global powers. So in the context of the situation in West Asia, India has held a high-level meeting. The Prime Minister chaired a meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security, the CCS, one of the most powerful cabinet committees in our country. And you should know the composition of this committee. The Cabinet Committee on Security, which deals with all national security matters, is chaired by the Prime Minister himself. The PM is the chairperson of this cabinet committee. And it includes the key cabinet ministers: the defense minister, the home minister, finance minister, external affairs minister. So the top cabinet ministers with the PM, they are part of the Cabinet Committee on Security. They can even invite other officials and ministers if required, but this is the composition of Cabinet Committee on Security. So the PM has taken stock of all the developments, and the PM has called for a whole of government approach to deal with this unprecedented crisis. Because we need to understand what will be the medium to long term implication. We are already experiencing the short term impact, but this war is going to leave behind a medium to long term implication which could affect India's growth, which could impact Indian diaspora in West Asia, which could affect the health of Indian economy, from fertilizer industry to petrochemical industry to chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Multiple industries are facing a serious threat. It could even become an existential threat for many industries. So that's why the government has taken stock of the developments, and the Prime Minister has ordered the establishment of a GOM, a group of ministers, where senior cabinet ministers would be drawn into this group, and they will try to bring interministerial coordination. Now, this challenge cannot be dealt alone by the External Affairs Ministry. It will require coordination with Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Petroleum, right? So that's why the whole of government approach is being prioritized. A group of secretaries is also being constituted at the secretary level to ensure interministerial coordination exists within the government to deal with the short term, the medium, and long term implications of the West Asia war. Next, a concerning development. US Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, who is also Trump's special envoy to Central and South Asia, is carrying out a controversial visit to Sri Lanka and Maldives. Now, why is it controversial? See, the visit of any American special envoy to small countries in our neighborhood has often been opposed by India. In fact, in the past, there was one similar incident under the Obama administration. Back in 2009, President Obama had appointed his special envoy, Richard Holbrooke, as the special envoy for entire South Asia. Now, the then Manmohan Singh government stood up against Obama's administration and opposed it. India raised a very strong diplomatic protest, saying that this amounts to US interference in India's backyard, in India's neighborhood. Because any extended US diplomatic involvement in our neighborhood is seen as problematic. It often runs counter to India's interests. So India pressurized Obama administration to take back the special envoy, and we opposed any visits by such special envoys to countries in our neighborhood. But now things are slightly different. Given the closeness in India-US relations, Sergio Gore is not just the US ambassador to India, he's also the special envoy to South and Central Asia. He has already visited multiple Central Asian countries. He recently visited Bhutan as well, as he is the ambassador to Bhutan. See, we have no issues if they have bilateral ties. US Sri Lanka bilateral relations, it's their domain. We will not interfere in that. If, let's say, US ambassador to Sri Lanka, of course, will engage with Sri Lanka, we have no issues with that. But having a special envoy in the region based out of India and visiting these countries, building contacts with them, establishing ties with them, is something where problem arises for India, as it undercuts India's influence. That's why in the past we have opposed such American special envoys for South Asia region. So last time, the Obama administration finally it backtracked and they appointed a special envoy only for Afghanistan-Pakistan region to deal with the Afghan war. Zalmay Khalilzad was appointed as the special envoy just to deal with the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. So his role was basically curbed following India's opposition. But now Sergio Gore is a special envoy for entire South and Central Asia. So India's concern is, will Sergio Gore act as sort of a mediator between India and Pakistan in case of tensions? He's likely to visit Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. And he's already on a visit to Sri Lanka and Maldives. So what exactly is US planning in India's neighborhood is something that worries India. India is closely watching the developments, but what we need to note is that Sergio Gore met with India's NSA before embarking on this visit. He met with Ajit Doval, briefed India's national security advisor as to what's the purpose of the visit. So according to India's former foreign secretary, Nirupama Rao, we need to see this as a quite strategic signaling by the US. We should not interpret this as American covert interference in our backyard. Rather, US is trying to step up its influence in the Indo-Pacific, probably to counter China. And India's interests might align with that of American interests. So either ways, India is closely watching the visit of Sergio Gore to countries like Sri Lanka and Maldives. Next, yesterday we spoke about the attack on nuclear sites, how Israel attacked Natanz and Iran retaliated by launching missiles at Dimona in southern Israel, which is believed to be the hub of a secret nuclear facility of Israel, where Israel's nuclear arsenal is believed to be stored. Now, in the context of this attack on Dimona, there is one topic you need to understand. The presence of the Indian community, the Indian Jewish community in Dimona. In the city of Dimona, you have a very large Indian community, a Jewish Indian community, primarily from Maharashtra. Right? In Maharashtra, you have a set of Jews linked with Israel, and thousands of them are settled in Dimona. So if you go to Dimona, you see a very, very strong Indian cultural presence over here. In fact, this place is even called Little India. There are Indian shops, children play cricket on the streets. Then Indian food is widely popular here. Indian festivals are celebrated. Marathi language is spoken on the streets of Israel in Dimona. So this is one cultural link that you need to be aware of. The Jewish community from Maharashtra that is settled in Dimona in Israel. Coming to another development, on page 9 we have this on the front page, sorry, make a correction here. This is on page 1. We have an article related to internal security, not social justice. This article is related to an attack carried out by ULFA Independent. ULFA Independent, which is a Northeast insurgent outfit, has carried out an attack aimed at Assam police, and 4 commandos have been injured. This attack took place in the Tinsukia district, which is located in eastern Assam, along the borders of Arunachal Pradesh. The attack took place very, very close to the Myanmar border at a place called Jagun, which is in Arunachal Pradesh, that lies next to Tinsukia in Assam. Now, this represents a serious concern for India because, see, ULFA is a notorious insurgent outfit. ULFA's history goes back to 1979, when there was strong opposition against illegal migration from Bangladesh. That was the root cause which triggered this insurgency in Assam. Because of the large-scale influx of Bengali refugees and illegal migrants, especially post-1971, after the liberation of Bangladesh, there were demographic changes happening in states like Assam. The native Assamese, they opposed and protested against this. They believed it was resulting in socio-economic changes. It was resulting in ethnic tensions, demographic changes. So this triggered the Assam agitation in 1979 that lasted until 1985. So in the course of the Assam agitation, where violent protests were taking place against the Indian government and the Assam government for failing to prevent the large influx of Bangladeshi illegal migrants, some of the radical student leaders who were part of the All Assam Students Union, They went on to set up a notorious insurgent group called ULFA, United Liberation Front of Assam, founded in 1979. This outfit was a separatist outfit. Their main trigger was India's failure to tackle illegal migration from Bangladesh, which was affecting the opportunities available for the youth, for the natives especially. So it launched as a separatist movement, seeking to break away from India to form a separate country, to form a separate state. And it was founded by student leaders such as Arvind Rajkova and Anup Chetia and Paresh Barua. There were a few others as well, but these are the most prominent extremists who founded ULFA. And from 1980 onwards, ULFA became notorious. It started carrying out major attacks in the region aimed at security forces, especially Assam police, Assam rifles, Indian army as well. It spread its presence and wings across northeast India. It even built contacts with other insurgent groups like NSCN from Nagaland, with all Tripura Tiger Force from Tripura, and even Bodo outfits like National Democratic Front of Bodoland, and even the Kamtapur Liberation Organization. All these insurgent groups fighting for different causes, they would often work in collusion, right? ULFA built a very effective network and it started using Bangladesh as a base. And look at the irony of this. The group was founded to oppose illegal migration from Bangladesh. But these terrorists themselves took shelter in Bangladesh just to hide away from Indian security forces. Because this is where they were getting covert backing from both Pakistan and China. Pakistan's ISI was actively backing groups like ULFA by using the hostile governments in Bangladesh. When a military regime existed in Bangladesh in 1980s, later when BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, came to power, a pro-Pakistan party, Pakistan's ISI found it very convenient to use the hostile regime in Bangladesh to back groups like ULFA. Then ULFA even found shelter in Myanmar across the border, where China's Ministry of State Security, the MSS, allegedly built contacts with ULFA rebels, arming them, funding them, training them by using Myanmar as a safe haven. So this group remained a notorious threat. It is a designated terrorist outfit under the UAPA, under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. However, in 2009-2010, India broke this outfit thanks to a friendly government in Bangladesh under Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The Awami League government fully cooperated with India. The then Manmohan Singh government made use of the opportunity and dismantled ULFA in Bangladesh. The terror camps were destroyed. Their supply of arms and weapons and funds were cut. And top leaders like Arvind Rajkova and Anup Chetia were arrested. And Bangladesh even extradited them to India. They were handed over to India. So since then, ULFA started negotiating with India and a peace process has been initiated. Though we are yet to sign a formal peace agreement, peace talks began with the arrest of Arvind Rajkova and Anup Chetia, who were detained in Bangladesh and handed over to India. Now, this is where a new branch of ULFA was born. As Arvind Rajkova, Anup Chetia, and others who were extradited to India, they agreed to talk to India and engaged in a peace process. The other leader who remained, Paresh Barua, he rejected the talks with India. India tried reaching out to this faction, but he rejected the talks outright. And he founded ULFA Independent. So ULFA I is a new faction of ULFA. So the parent organization of ULFA has been broken by India. It almost doesn't exist on the ground. The cadres have been largely arrested. Many of them have been brought back into mainstream. The top leaders have been detained and arrested, and a peace process is going on. But Paresh Barua rejected the peace talks with India, and he continues to operate against India by basing the group in Myanmar. Indian intelligence agencies believe that Paresh Barua has direct links with Ministry of State Security of China. Reportedly, through the Yunnan province of China, the MSS is providing arms and funds and backing to ULFA Independent, which is based out of Myanmar and carrying out attacks in Arunachal Pradesh and as well as in Assam. So this is the brief history of ULFA and ULFA Independent. So please understand, ULFA I is a faction, a breakaway faction of ULFA, led by Paresh Barua, who remains a wanted terrorist. And ULFA I is also a designated terror group under the UAPA. Coming to the prelim section, we just have 2 articles today. So let's wrap it up quickly. In this image that you find on the supplement page of the Hindu, there is a national park that is mentioned in Africa, the Kidepo Valley National Park. So this is located in Uganda. In the image, you can see a rhinoceros being held by the forest rangers. This is part of a wildlife exchange program between the neighboring countries of Kenya and Uganda. See, in the Kidepo Valley National Park, which was home to a very large rhino population, there is a serious environmental disaster which has occurred because of massive hunting and poaching of the rhinos. Uganda has almost lost its rhino population, especially in Kidepo National Park. Rhino population was wiped out. So now Kenya is helping its neighbor Uganda through its first wildlife exchange program, where rhinos are being transferred and translocated and being introduced in the protected areas. So Kidepo National Park is located over here. It shares borders with South Sudan. You can see over here. See, this is Uganda. This is Kenya here, right? You can see DRC, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia as well. Now, Kidepo Valley National Park is located over here in the northern parts of Uganda, sharing borders with the conflict hit South Sudan. This is also one of the reasons, since the region is affected by conflict and instability, there is rampant hunting and poaching. So that's why the location of this national park can become important. You can also see the Kidepo River, after which the national park is named, and the Narus River that flows through the protected area. So please note down these basic details. You might get a map-based question based on this. Coming to the last topic, on the supplement page itself, there's an article that mentions the MPC, Minor Planet Center. This is a very, very important institution in the field of astrophysics and astronomical observations. Minor Planet Center is based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the United States. That's where it is located. And it basically has a mandate to observe, study, detect, name any minor planetary bodies detected in the outer layers of our solar system. So last week, it has detected and named around 15 new moons, 4 of them belonging to Jupiter, 11 belonging to Saturn. So this functions under the International Astronomical Union through the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory that's located at Massachusetts in the United States. So the role of MPC, the Minor Planet Center, is to work under the International Astronomical Union to track any planetary bodies, minor planetary bodies, especially in the outer parts of the solar system. It could be asteroids, it could be comets, it could be new moons which are being discovered, or small planetary bodies. They're all detected, traced, the orbits are studied, the orbits are mapped and predicted. It also keeps an eye on near Earth objects which have the potential to strike Earth. So it works in close coordination with NASA's planetary defense. And it also shares the data and information with the global community so that the world can come together. Researchers from across the world can study these objects and share the data and information. So it is involved in naming these minor planetary bodies as well. And even if any institution discovers a new asteroid or a comet or a planetary body, they will refer the discovery to Minor Planet Center, which finally will take up the official designation which is given to it. So this is the nodal authority of sorts when it comes to minor planetary objects. So please make a note. It functions under the International Astronomical Union and it's based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. So with this, we bring today's discussion to an end. So let's end the session. If you like the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.